This is the story of street wars fueled by the Mafia. New York City. 1947. The city that never sleeps had been a battlefield for years between two gangs. The Lucchese crime family and the Genovese crime family. Both operating under the umbrella of the Mafia, both have been fighting over territory, money, and power. And after years of bitter rivalry, it all comes to a head in a battle for supremacy. The Lucas's crime family was one of the 5 great Mafia families in New York. For decades, they dominated the rackets in the city, raking in millions through illegal gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. But recently, the family's power has been challenged by the up-and-coming Genovese crime family. Led by the ruthless Charlie "Lucky" Luciano, the Genoveses have been expanding their territory and influence, threatening the Lucas's long-held dominance. Tensions have been rising for years, but now they've reached a boiling point. Both families are preparing for war, and when it erupts, it will be fought on the streets of New York. Joseph Bonanno, the boss of the Lucchese crime family, was a powerful and respected figure in the Mafia, despite his small stature. He was known as the Cigar for his imposing presence and fierce temper. His family had been involved in organized crime for generations, and he was determined to maintain their position of power. However, he's facing a formidable opponent in Charlie "Lucky" Luciano, the boss of the Genovese crime family. Luciano was a cunning and ruthless mobster who was willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. He had already made a name for himself by taking control of the narcotics trade in the United States, and he was unafraid to use violence to achieve his objectives. As the two bosses size each other up, it becomes clear that there can only be one winner. The stage is set for an all-out gang war in the streets of New York. The violence erupts suddenly and with devastating force. A member of the Genovese crime family is found murdered in cold blood, sparking outrage and threatening retaliation. Now the entire city is tense as the two families prepare for war. Joseph Bonanno wasted no time in assembling his team of elite soldiers. Among them were some of the most feared and respected mobsters in the city, men like Anthony Carfano, Thomas E. Joe Adonis, and Joseph Barbera. All loyal to the boss and ready to fight to the death if necessary. Together they formed an elite strike force tasked with carrying out Bonanno's orders and defending the honor of the Lucchese family. Meanwhile, Charlie "Lucky" Luciano was also readying his forces for the impending battle. His inner circle, which included Vito Genovese, Frank Castellano, and Albert Anastasia, strategizing and preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the Lucchese family. It was clear that this was not going to be an easy fight, but Luciano was confident that his family would emerge victorious. As the two sides prepared for battle, the streets of New York became a powder keg of violence. Each family was eager to strike first and strike hard, but neither wanted to make the first move that would provoke the other into a full-blown war. The tension was palpable as the two sides faced off, waiting for the other to make the first move. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that this standoff was becoming unsustainable. Something had to give. Then it happened. A member of the Genovese crime family was found murdered, sparking outrage and threatening retaliation. The entire city was tense as the two families prepared for war, and so the battle for New York began. The first strike came as a shock, catching the city and the underworld by surprise. The killer was never caught, but the message was clear. The Lucchese family was making the first move in the battle for supremacy. This brazen daylight murder sent shockwaves through the city and the Mafia world. The Genovese family was furious and vowed revenge. They suspected that the Lucchese family was behind the hit, and they were ready to retaliate. But as the days went by, there was still no sign of any response from the Genovese family. They had suffered a major loss, and their pride had been wounded, but they were being uncharacteristically silent. As the pressure mounted, Vito Genovese, the underboss of the Genovese crime family, decided to take matters into his own hands. He assembled a team of trusted associates and began planning a series of attacks against the Lucchese crime family. Their goal was simple: strike back at the Lucchese family and send a message that the Genovese were not to be messed with. As the Genovese family planned their retaliation, the Lucchese family was caught off guard. They had struck the first blow, but they were not expecting the Genovese to retaliate so quickly. They scrambled to defend their own, putting pressure on their soldiers to prevent any more bloodshed. The two families were now in a full-blown gang war, and the streets of New York were becoming increasingly dangerous. In the midst of the chaos, Vito Genovese's team struck, launching a series of attacks against the Lucchese crime family. The targets were carefully selected, aimed at sending a message of power and dominance. With each attack, the Genovese family showed just how dangerous they could be, striking fear into the hearts of the Lucchese family soldiers. The Lucchese family was shaken to its core. They had not expected the Genovese family to retaliate so swiftly and effectively, and now they were on the defensive. They knew that they had to act fast to stop the bleeding and send a message of their own. As the war escalated, the stakes grew higher, and the violence became more intense. Both families were desperate to prove their dominance, and they were unafraid to use any means necessary to achieve their goals. The question was, which family would emerge victorious? Would it be the seasoned Lucchese crime family, with their years of experience and power, or the up-and-coming Genovese crime family, with their ambitious leader and willingness to take risks? Only time would tell. As the war raged on, the people of New York City suffered. Caught in the crossfire of this gang war, they were innocent bystanders who had no part in the conflict. Yet they were paying the price. Businesses were destroyed, homes were burned, and lives were lost. It was a sad state of affairs, and many hoped that it would end soon. But with both families dug into their positions and refusing to back down, it seemed like the war would go on for a long time. But as the war dragged on, it became clear that something had to give. The two families were locked in a deadly stalemate, and neither could claim victory. Finally, after months of fighting, a peace deal was reached, and the war came to an end. The terms of the deal were never revealed, but it's believed that the two families agreed to a truce and a division of territory. The war may have come to an end, but the legacy of violence lived on. The battle between the Lucchese and Genovese crime families was a defining moment in the history of organized crime in New York City. It was a brutal and bloody conflict that left a lasting impact on the city and its residents. The war had been costly in terms of lives and property, but it had also been a defining moment for the Mafia in New York. It had established the Genovese crime family as a major player in the Underworld, and had solidified their position of power in the city. In the aftermath of the war, the Genovese crime family went on to become one of the most powerful crime families in the country. They continued to dominate the narcotics trade and expanded their criminal enterprises to new heights. On the other hand, the Lucchese crime family, although weakened by the war, still remained a powerful force in the underworld. They regrouped and refocused their efforts on other criminal activities, such as gambling and extortion. The impact of the war extended beyond the criminal underworld. It had a profound effect on the people of New York City. The violence and bloodshed had taken a toll on the community, and many residents had called for law enforcement officials to crack down on the Mafia's activities. However, the police were often reluctant to get involved in the gang's affairs, fearing the consequences of doing so. The war had also captured the attention of the media, which had a field day covering the bloody conflict. Newspapers and magazines were filled with stories of the violence, and many Americans were shocked by the level of brutality and bloodshed. As the years passed, the memory of the war faded from the public consciousness, but the impact of the conflict between the Lucchese and Genovese crime families continued to be felt for decades to come. It had forever changed the landscape of organized crime in New York City, and had left a lasting impact on the city and its residents. The conflict between the Lucchese and Genovese crime families was a pivotal moment in the history of organized crime in America. It led to the deaths of hundreds of mobsters and civilians alike, and in the end, it reshaped the criminal underworld of New York forever. If you want to learn more about the Mafia, stay tuned for more videos.